is around. He's right there. So, my name is Tom O'Brien, President of New Hampshire Lakes, and it is a great pleasure to welcome you here today. Someone else is going to have to tell me how many Lakes Congresses this has been, but 25 maybe?
26.
26, thank you. So it's like the 26th straight sunny day. We've had one a year. As a good friend of mine likes to say, it's good to be here because it's good here. So thank you. I was thinking about how to identify who's here. And I was thinking about kind of all the ways in which we might do that. By the way, it's getting embarrassing. I took a paper clip. You see what they've done to me? I've got this. It's getting a little silly, don't you think? I feel like if it falls off, I'm going to get whiplash. So it's getting stuck in my belt, so I thought I'd roll it up there. So I want to make a few introductions, and then we're going to move into our keynote address. And I'll try to talk in front of the mic. So you all come from amazing places throughout New Hampshire, many of them hidden from one another and hidden from plain view, but they are just absolute jewels of New Hampshire. So again, sponsors, Grapponi Automotive, our prime sponsor, the Lovett Woodson Foundation and the Barron Foundation, both stalwart and continuous sponsors now for several years running of this event. And this allows us to keep the rates, the registration rates, at what we consider modest and as low as we possibly can. So that literally helps to offset those costs and bring in some nationally recognized presenters and speakers as we have. I wanted to mention too that because it has a special place in my heart and in my head in terms of where we're going and how we're going to do this work 10, 20, 30, and 50 years from now. Because so many of you are wise, and that means of a generation in which our children and our children's children may not be here with us today. And so it's with great pleasure that I wanted to welcome the Lakes Region AmeriCorps volunteers, of which is a table of them here to my right. Want to stand up, folks? Over here. And some of the AmeriCorps volunteers are actually working out at the desk. There are 20 AmeriCorps volunteers, thank you, that have been recruited by the Squam Lake Association, and about half of whom are assigned out in pairs to various other groups like New Hampshire Lakes, and doing great conservation work. It's just an amazing experience, but there's the next generation of conservation stewards, and hopefully some of those will find their way and their place amongst the lakes of New Hampshire, doing and following in the footsteps that you've laid. So at New Hampshire Lakes, it's been an exciting year. We stood here a year ago and talked about the brand and how we were changing and growing. We said, we are New Hampshire Lakes. And the more I thought about that since then, I realized that in fact you are New Hampshire Lakes. You are the Lakes of New Hampshire, and you are in fact the organization that we are, that we have the privilege of helping to run and organize. But it is only through your participation, the work that you do, your support, your attendance at events like this, all that you do. This is the third year, by the way, that this event has been fully sold out, and that occurred some weeks ago. So it's just an amazing turnout. I'd like to suggest you give yourselves a hand. So thank you. There's been some real highlights between last year and this. I think it's safe to say, having been the lead lobbyist, as it were, the lead advocate over the State House since my arrival, and by the way, in print it also reads as the lead advocate, and I couldn't get my head wrapped around that. So as the lead advocate and growing in the last year, we were able to bring on an advocacy program coordinator in Kelly Buchanan. We brought on a conservation program coordinator in Crystal Costa, an outreach program coordinator in Erin Mastine. And these folks joined an already existing, stellar cast of Andrea Lamoureux, Martha Lovejoy, Erin Gratian. It's just a great team to work with and to be around. But we were just more proactive this year in all respects, having 3 bills now that have passed the House and the Senate, and that's 2 more than I did in any 1 year of my work. So I'm most impressed with that, which we've done. And that stuff winds its way through our conservation programming. So we'll see out in the parking lot today. I don't want you to go out there in droves, peek out in between, but don't miss your sessions. The infamous CD3 unit, Clean, Drain, Dry, and Dispose unit, all the way from Minnesota. I can't tell you what it took to get it here last night. It was an adventure, but it's out there. Andrea Lamoureux, our vice president, her husband, who's kind of an energy, mechanical geek. That's a good thing, right? Just has taken the day off from work to kind of like sort this thing out. And the manufacturer of the unit is out there working with them. I said to them this morning, I said, so you saw the movie Armageddon, right? And they were like, yeah, well, these 2 guys, of course, yeah. I said, so, you're the head of NASA and you're Bruce Willis. And you're gonna rip this thing apart and figure out how it works, what you want to replace and so forth. They were looking at me a little bit stunned, and I said, I don't mean that literally. But I would like the 2 of you to really go through this thing with a fine-tooth comb so that when Ed goes back to Minnesota, Phil is going to be able to teach us everything we need to know about how this works. And everybody we've talked to about the CD3 said, we want it to at a boat ramp near us, right? And so if you want to get on that list, let us know. Erin Gratian is taking names, and then we're going to try to figure all that out. Lake Smart is a new program that we're adopting from Maine. I think many of you have heard about it. Again, each association I've met with so far this year has said, sign us up. So we're rolling that out as well. And I'm going to spill the beans here, Lisa, that in fact, now that you've got your blueberry sod installed, she didn't want me telling everybody about this because she was afraid the cost was going to go up. The demand was going to be so great. I've been in this business a long time, and I had no idea they sell blueberry sod. You can get blueberry patches to replace grass with what will then grow blueberry bushes. Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is like, wow. I mean, it's just like, maybe I need to get out more often, but this was an exciting thing to me. So this is what's happening around the state. We're looking forward to learning more about what you're doing. We've got an amazing array of presenters here today, 5 tracks, session after session. Come back here at noon. There's going to be learning sessions around the tables if you choose, or just simply to network with your friends and folks you haven't made friends with yet. So, what have I missed? We've launched a new website. Please go check it out. Be kind, but be critical. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of volume. There's a lot of material to move from one place to the other and rebuild and rewrite. Please let us know where we've gotten it wrong and right, so we can continue to improve that. Last but not least, I would like to give a shout out to, again, the staff of New Hampshire Lakes who put this event together and put me in a position to succeed. They're like, you stand there, say this, and then you're done. But you got to wear these ribbons. And those folks are doing all this work, many of whom are not here right now because they're still out at the registration table. But many New Hampshire Lakes board members are here who have done an immense amount of work year in and year out, but this year in particular. So if we could have the board and the staff of New Hampshire Lakes, would you mind standing? Thank you so much. If you are interested in board service, please speak to any one of these folks. We're always having those conversations on an ongoing basis. So it's an amazing experience. It's an amazing privilege to be doing this now in my 8th year. And I feel like I'm just starting to get to know you and getting to know all the lakes. I haven't been to half of them yet, but I'm working on it. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Please network, enjoy, and I look forward to talking with as many of you as I can throughout the day. So moving now to our keynote address. Eric Eckl is with us today. He's been with us now a few times in the past in various capacities. I'm going to read a little bit. And I've met Eric. In fact, my outreach director a dozen years ago when I was in the Catskills in New York said, there's this company called Waterways that works. And they're into communicating, helping water organizations communicate better with their clientele, with their community. And so began this kind of long distance connection to Waterways that works. I went out to Oregon. I was working out there with a network of Oregon watershed councils. They said, there's this organization run by Eric Eckl out of Maryland called Waterways that Works. I came here to New Hampshire Lakes and they said, I didn't bring his name with me. They said, there's this organization out of Maryland. And so in each of these instances, Eric, we've done work with Eric, and now at New Hampshire Lakes, a number of things, but the branding work that many, if not all of you, were surveyed to have input to. They helped to direct, and we've asked them to come here today to talk more about the ways in which we communicate. Not, in some respects, we're the choir here, right? We're those committed ones, and what we're trying to do is figure out how the hundreds of other folks around the lake we live or in the community will do the things that we're doing. So everybody's a part of the solution. So a little bit about Eric. Founded Waterways that Works. The mission of the company is to ensure American people enjoy clean and safe water outdoors and at home, and they do this by helping clients and students succeed with their outreach and communication. Eric has more than 20 years in this work. He's a sought-after conference speaker by CNN, been quoted by the New York Times, and has worked for a number of other communication and marketing organizations prior to founding Waterways that Works. And so today he's going to be talking about really what it takes to motivate people to voluntarily adopt the lifestyles, the practices, the changes in behavior that it takes to protect and ensure clean water. So without any further ado, I'm going to give you Eric Eckl.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm really glad to be here. It's a beautiful weekend. This is my 4th time working with NH Lakes, and I'm really glad that this time it's worked out that I get to stay and play for a few days. There's a kind of a grubby camper with a bicycle strapped on the back out in the parking lot. Yes, that's mine. Nobody's cooking meth in there. I'm going to hit the Great Northern Rail Trail tomorrow, and then I'm open to suggestions for where I should put my kayak while I'm up here. So as Tom mentioned, I'm up here from Maryland. It's a state which actually has not a single natural lake. We're just a little too far south for the glaciers to have made it down there. We don't have any natural lakes. And I grew up here. This is Atlanta, Georgia, where I grew up. And this is pretty much the view out my bedroom window when I was a kid. Just skyscrapers and concrete as far as the eye can see. And of course, over my lifetime, the number of skyscrapers has increased and the height of them has increased, and it's been a remarkable transformation. So what do I have to say to a whole bunch of lake people from New Hampshire? Well, so I grew up in Atlanta. I'm going to start with a personal story, and I promise I'm going to go somewhere with this, because as I tell this kind of personal family history story about our relationship with the land and our relationship with the lakes, I think you'll hear echoes of your own stories. And as you turn as a community towards moving beyond the prevention of the spread of invasive species and working with other homeowners, landowners all around the lakes that you love, they all have stories similar to this one in some ways, different in others. And that family history will play into their receptivity, their excitement to do things to protect the lakes, even if they're not right on the lake. So I grew up in Atlanta. It's a mega city now. It's the Los Angeles of the South. I would never live there anymore. But both my mom and my dad grew up in Lauderdale County, Alabama, which is the far outskirts of Nashville, actually, over the state line. And that's on the Tennessee River, and so Wilson Lake is a big part of my childhood. We would go every summer out to Lauderdale County and spend time on Wilson Lake. That's not me, but it could have been. Actually, the one that's most likely to be is the guy who fell off and is in the back with his hands up, raising his hand for help. I assure you that even though there are no natural lakes anywhere where I grew up, I have many memories of summers on the lake, fishing, boating, water skiing, just like all of you. Alabama. Now I'm going to share a chart with you. It's kind of an unusual thing to do at a keynote, but I stared at this chart for a long time when I was first preparing the first version of this speech, and I realized that this timeline tells a very rich story that is meaningful for the work that you are beginning to embark on with LakeSmart. So this is from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Census of Agriculture. We got 3 lines, and the bottom line there is the number of acres of land in the United States that are in agriculture. And what you see there is starting in about 1935, it has basically not moved at all. That is the most stable line of any kind of social or economic indicator that I have ever seen. Now, of course, there are farms that are going out of production and turning into housing developments, etc. The number is going down ever so slightly. But for the most part, the amount of land that is in agricultural production is remarkably steady. But what is changing is the patterns of who owns that land. You look at the blue line on top, that is the number of farms, which peaked in 1935, went down a lot until the mid-70s, and then has stabilized more or less. And then the average size of the farms went up a lot between the 40s and the 70s, but has more or less stabilized since then. So the amount of land that's in ag, it's in rural use, has basically stayed the same, but there's been a lot of consolidation of who owns it. And at these various points along the way, there are milestone moments in my family history, and I bet yours too. So back there in 1860 something, that's when the ancestral Eckls, who were living in Pennsylvania at the time, realized that land in Alabama after the Civil War was super cheap, and they decided to trade frigid Pennsylvania winters for sweltering Alabama summers, and ended up in Lauderdale County. At the time that they all went from Pennsylvania down to Lauderdale County, I think all the creeks in Alabama looked like this. Look at those giant cypress trees. That's the Deep South for you. Those things are unbelievably cool, and they live forever. They just found a cypress tree last week in North Carolina that predates the birth of Christ. That's how long that tree has been on this earth. Now, the story really begins there in the late 30s when there were 4 brothers, one of whom was my grandfather Louis Eckl. They all owned farms out in Lauderdale County. And the way the family story goes is that one day Louis Eckl was out there hoeing on the family farm. The point of the story being that he was out there hoeing by hand, because that's how it was done. Wiped the sweat off his brow, threw the hoe in the ground, said, "F this," and walked 10 miles into town. Got a job at the local newspaper, founding the big talking, good writing branch of the Eckls. That's right about there when the number of farms in the United States was at its peak. Just a couple years later, World War II broke out. Now, 2 of the remaining brothers on the farm go off to serve with distinction in North Africa and Italy, the 2 of them. I still have a steel box that one of them used to hold ammo for the machine gun that he used. So now the 4 farm brothers has turned into 1 farmer. That's my great Uncle Harry. He got exempted from serving because somebody had to raise the food. But with having gone from 4 brothers to 3, changes had to be made. And so right through this period, my great Uncle Harry, and I'm sure many of your ancestors, parents, uncles, neighbors, began farming with machines. The number of farmers was going down, the number of farms were going up, the farms were getting bigger, and the whole thing was becoming a lot more mechanized and a lot more intense. And all the streams in Alabama that used to look like this, well, now a lot of them look like that. The land has been terraformed, transformed, the stream banks have been cleared. The patches of pasture and cropland are larger, they go right to the edge, and machines make sure that not a square inch of arable land is wasted. And of course, the downside of that is that means that the rain is falling on a lot less natural vegetation and a lot more cleared soil. That's a lot more runoff. Now, right about this time where those two lines cross, that's when my father, a member of the big talking good writing branch of the Eckls, decided that the opportunity wasn't good enough in Alabama and made his way to the city of Atlanta, where I was born. And this is a sign from an apartment building that's near where I grew up, and it's kind of a landmark. It's the Darlington apartment building, and they have a sign there with a clock that shows Atlanta's population. Now, when I was a kid, the first number there was 2 million. It was about 2728 when I was in high school, and we all talked about the day that would come when it would break 3 million, and we thought we would arrive as a big city. I was back in Atlanta over Christmas to see my parents, and we are now at 8 million and counting. Now, Atlanta's growth is exceptionally rapid, but this is what's been going on all across the United States. As a percentage of the population, rural communities, like around many of your lakes, just haven't grown that much relative to the slice of the pie, but tons of that growth is almost all occurring in the cities and the suburbs, and of course that means a lot more of this and a lot more of that. Now, there's all different kinds of water pollution. There's all different kinds of threats to the lakes and the rivers and the waterways that we all love. But it's the runoff that's the one that's growing the fastest. So it's time for the New Hampshire Lakes community, the community of New Hampshire Lakes lovers, to think about what do we do about the runoff. And of course, the challenge is that the changes that set this problem in motion have all occurred. They've occurred over generations. They've occurred over decades. It took a long time for the land to change that much, and it's going to take a while for us to put it back again. I'm going to show you some horror stories from around the country, things that you don't want to have happen here. So I come from the Chesapeake area, as you know. I'm about an hour west of Baltimore and Washington there. You just kind of scooch out there to the foothills of the mountains. That's where I am. Chesapeake Bay is top of mind environmental concern in Maryland, and polluted runoff makes parts of it look like this at the worst times of the year. Look at all that algae. Look at all that muck. That's all just running off the land. We're working now with a trio of communities in Iowa, Iowa City, North Liberty, and Coralville. The development there has been so rapid, and the lawn practices, the lawn care practices of the developers are so bad, have been so bad, that all the ponds and lakes, which they love almost as much as you do, they're starting to look like this too, and that's all just fertilizer from lawns. Now, the worst of all, kind of the poster child for runoff in rural areas in particular, this is western Lake Erie. That's the city of Toledo, Ohio down there. You see Ann Arbor, Michigan, just a little bit up the way there. This is some pretty intensely farmed country, more intensely farmed than here. And on the worst days, portions of western Lake Erie actually look like that. Now, fortunately, New Hampshire has a lot more forests relative to the farmland in its rural areas, but none of you want to see your lakes look like that. Well, and the first challenge is the kinds of practices that I just showed you: French drains, drainage strips, rain barrels, rain gardens, all of the things that homeowners can do, residents can do that reduce runoff from their property. They don't really understand them. They understand them as a solution to their immediate on-property drainage problems, and they don't really see them as a measure that can protect the environment and protect the lake. That's just not part of what they think. So what do we do about that? Here's where they think the pollution comes from. They think it comes from big factories that dump toxic chemicals in the water and kill the fish. This is a stubbornly persistent perception outside of this room about what's wrong with our water. And partly it's stubborn because people aren't paying that much attention, not as much as you guys. And partially this myth is stubborn because it's convenient. The myth is convenient. If pollution comes from there, they gotta fix it. If it comes from my house, then I gotta fix it. I'd rather believe it comes from there. They gotta fix it. They got all the money in the world, whoever they are. I don't. So what do we do? If they don't immediately connect runoff from their property to water pollution, how do we get through and get them to control the runoff from their property? Well, part of it, the solution, is with the way you present the solution and how you do it. And the most important word on that slide is show. Showing is way better than telling. And if you start the showing with pictures like this, what is shown here is a solution to a homeowner's problem. Water ponding in the garden, flooded basements, drowned landscaping. And the same things that you offer to reduce the runoff reaching the lake can also control drainage and water management problems on the property. This will get a homeowner's attention if they've had any of these kinds of problems, whether you connect it to the lake or not. And in the business of sales, we call this the open. You open and then you close. And those are equally important. They're the yin and yang of sales, and opening by focusing on the problem as the landowner experiences it, showing them examples of the kinds of problems they may be experiencing, and they are perhaps eager to solve. But after the open comes the close. Closing is equally important. We open with their problem, close with our problem, that's the lake. And to connect the kinds of practices that keep their property clear to the lake can also be done with photos. Now, this is not a lake program right here. This is a Chesapeake Bay example, but I love it. Before and after, and side-by-side photos take very complicated things and make them instantly accessible. So what's the caption on these two tanks? The water was pulled out of the Chesapeake Bay right there and left in these tanks for an hour. And the only difference is the tank on the right has oysters. That is what oysters do for the Chesapeake Bay. It tells the story in an instant about why we need more oysters. The amount of words that you would take to explain this, the amount of words that it would take to explain that is too many words. There's very few people who want to read that many words, but with an appropriate before and after picture, well-chosen side-by-side picture, you can help people get the idea of what's going on in the amount of attention that they are willing to give you when you are first broaching an idea. Open with the problems that the homeowner, the landowner may have, and the solutions you may be offering for the problem that they are experiencing, and then close by connecting the solution to their on-property problems with the problems of the lake that you love, and hopefully they love as well. Now, the second challenge is, of course, is a lot of these practices, they aren't easy do-it-yourself jobs, and they are not necessarily cheap. Now, the costs may seem modest relative to how much you love the lake. I love the lake so much that what's a few $100s for some of these things? But unfortunately, the richer Americans get, the more we spend. And for a whole lot of your neighbors in and around the lakes that you love, even a few $100s of expense may squeeze them if they didn't see it coming. Even $500 can be a big deal for a lot of landowners if they weren't prepared for it. And of course, many of the projects that make a pretty big difference can be quite daunting. And we worked with a client in Pennsylvania, and their goal was trees planted in urban neighborhoods. So we had the chance to do a survey, and we found that, man, homeowners really like the trees. They want to have more trees. We thought they would object to the raking. We thought that they would object to the branches falling. And what came back is, actually the reason that we don't have any more trees is that we're afraid to dig the hole. That was the number one barrier to planting the trees, is that they had an image. They'd come back with one of those ones in the bag, and the tree's already 5 feet tall, and they got to dig a hole that's 3 feet wide and 3 feet deep, and boy, that's a lot of work. And what do you do with the soil once you're done? That was the number one obstacle to planting more trees. Many of the things that we're talking about, the drains and the dry wells and the rain barrels and the rain gardens, they might not seem like a big project to you relative to how much you love that lake, but for an average homeowner, those are big deals. I'll tell you what, I have a rain barrel on the side of my house, and it was all fun and games until it was time to cut the gutter. And then I picked up the bat phone and called for help, because you don't want me cutting gutters. So you got to help them. As the program matures, and as your ambition levels grow, at some level, technical assistance and help paying for it has to be found. You have to find a way to help cover the cost. You have to find a way to help some of these homeowners move the dirt. And a lot of that can be delivered through contractors. Now, the norm that I see with all of their various programs of this nature is to offer rebates. This is from a different county in Maryland, where you can get some pretty generous rebates for these improvements. But the problem is, rebates are inherently problematic. The homeowner has to put the money out first, keep all the receipts, get the rebate. It's complicated. It's a barrier. Every project that I've seen that relies on the homeowners to shell out the cash first in order of receiving a rebate later has struggled to find people to participate. The ones that have waiting lists are the ones where they work through contractors. The contractors are aware of the program. They are partners in the program. They fill out the paperwork. They cut the cost to the homeowner up front, anticipating the rebate from the nonprofit or the association or the government later. They have an incentive to do this because if they can bring the cost of the work down, they can sell more of these. And the contractors have another advantage. They get more face time with landowners and homeowners than you guys do. And they got a profit motive. So if they're out there to fix the roof and they see water puddled in the yard, they can seize a moment that you, as the Lake Association, might never have. You don't get routinely invited out onto the property to meet with them to solve another problem and spot an opportunity for a lake improvement, but contractors, they do have that. And of course, if the homeowners have drainage problems on their property, the local lake association is probably not the first place they think to call for help, because they're not connecting their drainage issues on their property to the lake. That's just not a connection they make until somebody like you points it out. The first person they're going to probably call is some kind of a landscaping contractor, home improvement company, and they can be really great partners for this kind of thing. They can help the landowner up front, and they can just make it easier for the landowner. It's in their best interest to do that. The programs that work through contractors in this way often have waiting lists. The ones that rely on the homeowner to come collect a rebate are often undersubscribed. Now, one of the big challenges that people don't see coming is indecision from the landowners. And this slide right here explains it all. And the key point here is, yes, he needs to ask his wife. And the reality is, a lot of times you're just left in limbo as we wait for the decision. And many of the things that you are quite familiar with and can be incorporated into reaching out to landowners for this is different ways to kind of force the question. We want to give them a nudge to say, today's the day, over coffee, at breakfast, we're going to talk about Lake Smart. And the two magic words there are urgency and scarcity. I'm going to show you some examples of people who are incorporating urgency and scarcity into their efforts to get you to do something. Where on earth is he going with this? So every time Chick-fil-A opens up a new store, it's one of their marketing practices that the first 100 customers at that particular Chick-fil-A will receive one free Chick-fil-A sandwich for a week for a year. Now, I like Chick-fil-A just fine. What's one of those sandwiches cost? $3? A week, once a week, $3. It's like $150, $175. If you told me, how about I pay you $175 to camp out in a parking lot in the rain all night, I'd say I'm going to need a lot more than $175 to sleep in a tent in the rain in a parking lot. But you make it a contest, and look at that. There they are, camped out overnight, determined to be one of the first 100 to get that. They want the bragging rights and they want the free sandwich. And by making it a contest, they've totally flipped the psychology on its end. And now people are competing for that opportunity. It's scarce. There's only so many of these to go around. Here's one. This is Purina. You'd be the first 100 customers to come in with a competitor's bag of animal feed, and we'll give you a free bag of our feed. They're creating scarcity. There's only so much free stuff to go around. And then, of course, deadlines. That's Tractor Supply on the left. It's the Thanksgiving sale. This is Polaris on the right. It's the summer sales event with rebates. Why do they do these things? So you get around to it. The whole point is to give you a reason to get around to it. With the kinds of programs that we're talking about here today, the ones that seem to be more successful are the ones that have certain time periods by which you must act in order to receive our assistance. The same way you have enrollment periods for insurance. If we didn't have enrollment periods, we might neglect to get our insurance done. Some kind of an annual cycle, twice a year cycle, quarterly cycle, whatever it is, some kind of a sense of while supplies last on our cost share, while supplies last on our technical share. Sounds like you'd be making it more difficult for the landowner because you're giving them less time to play with, but in fact what we're doing is giving them a deadline by which they must get the procrastination done. And that procrastinate, allowing them to, if you allow them to procrastinate, they will. And the programs that are the most successful do not give them a certain amount of time by which then the procrastination needs to be done. Now, as you begin to roll forward and reach out to more landowners about the runoff, you'll find that there's a lot of people who are interested. You think, oh, they stuck up their hand. They said they're interested. We're going to be out there and we're going to put that rain barrel on next Tuesday. 6 months later, maybe even a year later, it's not done yet. But a lot more people have expressed interest, and before you know it, even some of your small associations may have conversations with several dozen landowners going at once. You can very quickly find your place. Yes, you got a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen homeowners around the lake or upstream from the lake who have expressed some level of interest. They're somewhere along the way towards getting these things done, and now it's a struggle to keep track of them all. So now here are a couple of top people that I've had a chance to interview about some of the programs that they're involved in, and what they're all going to tell you is various variations of you got to keep bugging people. This is Greg Potter with Trout Unlimited in Michigan. He says he works with farmers on stream restoration projects. He says most sales in agribusiness take 5 calls, and most people doing the selling stop at 3. This is James DeDector with Michigan State University, and he says, I don't expect them to take the reins. It's my responsibility to carry the relationship forward. And basically everything you need to know about working with homeowners to voluntarily modify their property in a way that's going to bring a lasting benefit to the lake. It's this young gentleman right here got the right attitude for that kind of work. Not threatening, plenty friendly, never quite gives up or goes away. And that's a really easy thing for me to say. But in fact, it's a pretty hard thing to do, because the number of contacts that may be considering Lake Smart, may be considering the rain barrel, may be considering the pervious driveway can quickly get to the point where you can't keep it all in your own head. And a lot of conservation professionals, a lot of folks like yourselves, only realize that they can't keep it all in their own head when they're overwhelmed. So as you consider moving forward, it's best to anticipate that situation and start out and do some Google searching, do a little homework, talk to a salesman that you may know in your town about all the different tools and the techniques that they use to keep track of the appointments, to keep track of, have they said they're interested? Did they say they're interested in writing? Did they ask me to come visit? Did they tell me when they were going to make up their mind? Did they tell me what their objection was? All of this information that we track to keep on top of all of these things. There are plenty of tools that are out there that make it pretty easy to do, and they make it a lot easier if you start with one rather than kind of dig yourself into a hole for a few months before you realize that you should have done that from the beginning. So now it seems like there's a lot of challenges out there, but these top programs in just a few years, it's impressive what they are getting done. So this is the Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program. And in just a few years, they have enrolled 5,000 farms, which have completed. Each farm gets a customized checklist of the environmental improvements that are recommended. Sometimes it's super fast, and sometimes there's quite a lot to do. But it's similar to the Lake Smart idea in that it's a customized checklist developed each property by property Once you can show you've done everything on the checklist, you're recognized, you get a big sign to hang out in front of the farm, and there are other benefits as well. 5,000 farms and counting. They just celebrated in March their 5,000th farm. This is River Smart in D.C., Washington, D.C., 9,000 homes and counting. And it's a great experience. We had the opportunity to do a survey for them. We surveyed all of the past participants, and we kind of heard from them about what's working for them, what's not. And then I was having dinner with a friend of mine in D.C., and she's a pollster. She writes polls for a living. I started telling her about this survey we had conducted. She says, "Oh, I took that survey. That was a good survey," which made me feel good. Because she was a participant, and it turned out that the patio that we were sitting on was an all-pervious patio, and the rainwater would soak through her patio, and the District of Columbia had helped her do it. She put up some money, they put up some money, they sent a contractor, it all got done. She was super excited about it. 9,000 homes and counting. The River Star home, that's the Virginia Beach area. Again, a customized list of things that the homeowner connects to. 4,650 homes and counting. These are what the top programs are reaching in the space of 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But for every one of these programs, there's another one that has information on a website, a program to offer, and just can't seem to find the homeowners willing to step forward and do it. There are some programs that are more successful than others, and that's where these and the things that differentiate the successful ones from the less successful ones are the things that we just went through. So it takes a while for these programs are snowballs, and they start small and they build. When we survey the farmers that have participated in the program, what's the number one way they hear about the program? From other farmers, which is fine when you have 5,000 farmers and you're 4, 5, 6 years in, but that is a problem when you are just getting started and there are no farmers to give you word of mouth. Same thing here. We surveyed the past participants in the River Smart program. Number one way they hear about the program, they saw that sign in front of somebody else's house. So we have the chicken and the egg issue. Takes a while. This is a long, slow building program. And I haven't surveyed the River Star homeowners, but I assume you would say the same thing. I saw the flag. I saw the bumper sticker, however. But then by the same token, if you commit and you stick with it, and you are a group of people who get it done, you can build up to some pretty impressive numbers in a reasonably short time. And begin to shift the debate in the community to what is normal, what do we expect. In many neighborhoods, we assume that if you don't mow your lawn, you're a bad neighbor. Can we imagine a world where if we don't have a rain barrel, you're a bad neighbor? That's what these programs have the potential to bring about. So I'm going to close by telling you one of my favorite lake memory stories. John boat that was next to the lake, and it was turned over upside down, and the adults were very firm that the kids should not play in the John boat. And they told us that so many times that eventually me and my cousin Kristen became determined to play in that John boat. And then there came a point a little later in the afternoon where the adults were all distracted and the John boat was unguarded. So my cousin Kristen and I flipped that John boat over and we pushed it out into Wilson Lake and we started paddling around, and pretty quickly we realized that the reason the adults didn't want us to use the John boat is that some of the rivets that were holding it together were missing and the thing leaked very badly. And that John boat is now at the bottom of Wilson Lake. I don't remember if we ever fessed up and told the adults who had done it. I think we kind of hoped that they wouldn't notice that it was missing. So my water conservation career started by sinking a boat to the bottom of the lake and littering it. I'm trying to make amends by helping all of you do a better job keeping the lake clean. But I think that everybody ought to grow up with memories like that of various adventures in and around the water. Maybe they don't have to involve sinking any actual boats, but all of you know, I am totally preaching to the choir on that these memories bring families together and provide a lifetime of value for all of us. Hopefully, I wish you the best of luck in your efforts to reach out to your neighbors all around the lake and upstream and invite them in to our community by making it clear, making it accessible, helping them understand what they can do, helping them pay for it, and providing them the customer service experience that brings them there. Thank you all for your time this morning. Best of luck with your work going forward.